Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brandon Turbeville broadcasting from Mullins, South Carolina. I wanted to talk to you a little tonight, building upon the last podcast that I've done about some of the more recent articles I've written for Activist Post dealing with the Council of Governments and the Agenda 21 issue at the local level. The article is As Above, So Below, the Globalist Agenda Reflected in Local Politics Through Council of Governments. Before I get underway with this discussion, I want to get a little advertisement out of the way. As most of you will be aware, I'm a staff writer for Activist Post, activistpost.com. And if you want to follow my work, you can just go to the website of activistpost.com and follow me on the home page there. I have articles on a fairly regular basis that go out. You follow the articles as they come out there on the home page, but if you want to take a look at my work individually, you can click on the Contributors tab and find my name. Click on my name and it will take you to a page full of my articles. I am also the author of 4 books: Codex, Alimentarius, The End of Health Freedom, 7 Real Conspiracies, 5 Cent Solutions, Dispatches from a Dissident, Volume 1. I encourage you to go check those out. They're available at thebookpatch.com. You can go to that page, thebookpatch.com, and search my name or search the titles of the books, and they should come up. You could also go to falseflagpublications.blogspot.com, falseflagpublications.blogspot.com, and it'll have a picture of the books and a Buy Now button that you can click on for easy access. I also run another blogspot page. It's brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. If you want to follow my work, but bear in mind, even though I repost all of my articles to this site, it's usually a few days after the articles have come out on Activist Post. So if you want to follow my work, if you want to follow the news in general, Activist Post is a great place to be. You should be going there in any event to check on what's going on that site. So that is the advertisement section of this podcast. So I want to return to the article, As Above, So Below, the Globalist Agenda Reflected in Local Politics Through Council of Governments. Again, you could just Google that with my name and it should come up. In fact, if you just Google the title in some way, shape, or form, the article should come up and it should be available for you relatively easy. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the article in more detail than I did to begin with on the last podcast that I've done, which was only about 20 minutes, but I think we're going to spend some more time on this. And I'm really just going to read through the article and hopefully shed some more light on these events. So, the article begins. For those who consistently wonder how far the tentacles of the control system reach upward, the real question better asked might actually be how far down. While many imagine a top-down system that stops at the federal or state level, the truth is far from that. Indeed, even among those who are aware of the local aspects of the globalist system, it is assumed that a small select group of corrupt individuals are the only controlling factor in the implementation of international regulations at the local level. Again, this is a fallacy which serves to weaken the very movement that is actively opposing the imposition of the globalist system. The fact is that those individuals and committees implementing globally standardized guidelines and policies at the local level are not merely select groups who are willing recipients of federal grants, but a wide-ranging cadre of local politicians, bureaucrats, and wealthy businessmen who work together through a complex set of organizations, groups, and councils. This is not to say, however, that every or any person actively furthering the globalist agenda is actually aware of the plans he is helping to implement. In truth, it is much more likely that these individuals at the lower and local levels are largely ignorant of the ramifications of their actions. Most are simply interested in furthering their own careers and benefiting from the low-level corruption that placed them in their positions to begin with and increasing the size of their investment portfolio. As one moves up the structure of control, the level of knowledge regarding the ultimate agenda obviously increases more and more. It would be impossible to describe the spiderweb connections between the various international, national, state, and local organizations and individuals who facilitate the implementation of the globalist agenda in one article. However, specific players and regions may be explained in more depth, as an example using this writer's own location. Bear in mind the conditions and organizations are not unique to South Carolina. They exist in virtually every state in the country and in virtually every city and town across the nation. And this is true. This is me talking here. I found out about the Council of Governments through another article I was writing about some South Carolina legislation that was coming down the pike in the state Congress here in South Carolina. And part of the legislation was a suggestion, was some sort of a resolution at the state level that was going to be sent to the South Carolina Councils of Governments for implementation. And at the time, I had no idea what the Councils of Governments were. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know what purpose they served. And to my knowledge, nobody else did. So there's a little snippet of information in one of the articles that I've done before on this issue. I think South Carolina moves to implement Agenda 21, I think is the title of the article, or something to that effect if you want to go look at it. But in any event, it's not much detail about the Council of Governments. It was fairly new to me at the time. I found out more, and I'll talk about this in the article, but I found out more later as I was investigating what appeared to be a local issue to Marion County here in South Carolina some time ago regarding the penny sales tax. There was a move to increase the sales tax of the county by 1 cent in order to fund some fairly ridiculous projects. There are some things that were worthwhile, of course, like the expansion of the library, park refurbishment, these sorts of things that do need to be done. Unfortunately, in a county like ours, where unemployment is hovering around the official statistics are 19% unemployment in Marion County, South Carolina, and we know that the official numbers are always much higher than the real numbers are always much higher than the official numbers, usually double and slightly more than that. So you could take 38% unemployment. It's quite a bit of people out of work here, and they want to raise the tax on people in Marion County by 1 penny. They estimated that it would bleed $9 million out of the county. That was estimated by the County Tax Commission, who's supporting raising this tax. Now, I won't get into all of the reasons and divert into a big monologue regarding the penny sales tax in Marion County. But of course, we do know that when you raise taxes, when you cut services, when you cut benefits, when you do these types of things in the middle of an economic depression, which I would assume that all learned people would understand and agree with, that we are in an economic depression and not a recession as the mainstream media would have you believe, that it actually makes the economy worse. Your tax receipts actually go down the next year. Now, I say more people who are awake might understand that, but the general person probably doesn't understand that at all, admittedly. But also on the penny sales tax issue, Marion County, not only did they want to refurbish parks and libraries, which again is a legitimate project when you can afford it, but they also wanted to do things like expand the rural fire departments here in the county, and they wanted to build wellness centers, or build a wellness center. This is going to be a very expensive project, and to me, one of the most ridiculous. It was going to be a large wellness center. They have one in Dillon County. I know of that wellness center well, very well. These centers are large. They usually have basketball gyms. They have workout gyms, workout classrooms, and the like. And this is what was planned for Marion County. It's a total waste of taxpayer money. In good economic times and bad economic times, this is a total waste of taxpayer money. I know of no returns on this money at all. Expanding rural fire departments and such could be beneficial, but in the situation we have here in the county, the rural fire departments can barely afford the equipment that they have and the facilities that they have, much less expanded facilities that they're going to have to pay for in the future. All of this is not going to come from the penny sales tax. Now, that was the issue that I initially started to pay attention to because it affected me locally, and at the time I believed this was a purely local issue. I thought it was local to Marion County, and I tried to approach it that way. I've written articles and sent them to the local paper to no avail. The local paper will not print my articles, even though it meets all of the guidelines and standards. They will not print them. It doesn't matter how well written. And I've actually asked for clarification as to why my articles were not printed in the Marion Star Mullins Enterprise paper here in the county. I received no response in my questions, but I can only imagine it's because certain elements in Marion County, as in most small towns and small rural areas and everywhere else in the nation, it's not unique to this area or to bigger cities or anywhere really. It's truly is as above so below, which is why the title of the article is so applicable and accurate. But the paper refused to post my letters. People who wish to speak out against this tax increase that's coming, they conveniently can't find out where the meetings are at. See, they go around and they have these public meetings, these public hearings for the public to go out and speak and give their position to the County Tax Commission and tell them whether or not they support it or oppose it. But generally speaking, the people who oppose it don't know when the meetings are going to be. You usually find out about the meetings a week later when they're posted in the Marion Star and Mullins Enterprise. They certainly aren't posted there the week before in a manner where you can find it easily. So therefore, when you go to the meetings, or if you go to the meetings, they're usually populated by individuals who support it because they've conveniently gotten the memo to come to the meeting and speak out about their support for the increase of the penny sales tax. And of course, they've got some small business owners here in the county who actually support this for whatever their reasons. And people are easily coaxed in supporting or opposing whatever the power structure wants them to support or oppose, given the right propaganda, given the right pressure, and given the right potential benefits of selling out. But at these meetings, you'll find out when you read the local paper that there's very little discussion of whether or not there should be a penny sales tax. The discussion centers around how the money should be spent, not whether it should be spent. The discussion is, should we spend it on a wellness center? Should we refurbish the library? Should we refurbish the parks? Not whether or not this should be an issue to begin with. Now, I found out through talking with other people. Now, Horry County is the county that's next to Marion County, and Horry County has never seen a tax it didn't like. You could probably go through Horry County today and propose a 2% or 2 cent sales tax increase for anything of your choice, and they'd pass it. Not so much other counties in South Carolina. It varies. But I found out through speaking with an activist friend from another county here in South Carolina that they were recently fighting the penny sales tax in their county, and that a friend of theirs in yet another county was also fighting the penny sales tax. So generally speaking, when you see something happening, see the same thing happening in different areas at the same time, it should make your spidey sense go off, and you should realize that there's an agenda afoot, that these things aren't coincidental, that there's a bigger agenda at foot here, which is what I realized and why I started to research it. And continuing on in the article. Thus, one should pay very close attention to the methods used and the organizational setup developed in order to further the goals of the globalists at the local level, and use the framework that is described in this and subsequent articles for the purpose of uncovering and exposing the hidden governmental system that exists in one's own community. Indeed, as my own experience highlights, although the structure of the system has been established in plain view, it is easily overlooked and hidden. Had it not been for a seemingly local issue, I myself might never have discovered its existence. And then I go into the Marion County situation. We'll reread that here in a second, but I should point out that as you're listening to this, if you've made it this far into the broadcast and you're wondering why should I care about a penny sales tax in some small county in South Carolina that has no bearing on what's happening to me in my local area or the national area, don't be so sure of that yet. The reason I go through this, the reason I talk about Marion County, South Carolina, is because the same thing is happening in your county wherever you are in this country. Now, it might not be the penny sales tax. It might be, but it might be something else. It might be a green initiative. It might be a more open Agenda 21 initiative like the California Councils of Governments. Whatever it is, the structure is largely the same. And I want to give you this as an example so you can recognize this happening in your area. And please don't approach this as a Marion County, South Carolina issue. Approach this as an example of how it works in your own area, so you can see it and so you can get out there and fight it as well. So continuing on. Over the last several months, Marion County, South Carolina has been debating, I use that term loosely, the introduction of a new penny sales tax under the guise of funding various projects. Some of these allocations are more justifiable than others, but by and large, most of the projects suggested were examples of wasteful spending given the current economic circumstances of the United States and Marion County in particular. When real numbers are added up properly, Marion County has approximately 38% unemployment, and like the rest of the country, shows little signs that there will be any improvement in the foreseeable future. Even so, individuals within the Marion County Tax Commission have begun agitating for a 1-cent raise in the county sales tax. These individuals have estimated that approximately $9 million will be bled from the people of Marion County for the pet projects they have introduced. Some of these projects, such as the county library expansion, a new animal shelter, and park refurbishment, should indeed be undertaken at some point in the future. But the shape Marion County is currently in, and the options being presented to the people, it would not be wise to attempt to undertake them at this point. Other projects, however, are unbelievably frivolous. Commission members have suggested the expansion of rural fire department facilities when the rural fire departments are so financially strapped that they cannot afford the facilities they currently have. Obviously, providing these departments with more expensive facilities and equipment that is accompanied by even more debt is a recipe for disaster in the long run. The icing on the cake, however, is the proposed wellness center that has been suggested by commission members. The center will essentially be a gym and recreation center. It will no doubt cost an extraordinary amount to construct and maintain. Yeah, because after these buildings, this is me. After these buildings, actually it's all me because it's my article too. But these buildings, after they're built at extraordinary taxpayer cost, after they're built, they have to be maintained. People have to clean them. The facilities have to be maintained. Repairs have to be made. There will be inevitable damage when these things are built and open up to the general public, and they're going to have to be replaced. Equipment's going to have to be replaced. They can't use the same weight equipment for 30 years. They're going to have to build new stuff. These are basketball gyms. The floors have to be kept up properly. Bathrooms, that sort of thing. All plumbing, electric bills, and the taxpayer will pay for. Air conditioning. All of this has to be maintained. So this is not a one-time cost. This is also not a money maker. Okay, even if they charge for people to come into these things, it's not a money maker. So I digress. The entire project is an utter waste of money for Marion County and will do nothing to improve the economy. The work will certainly be outsourced, or the quality of health and life in the county. That's right, because whenever they build this stuff, generally speaking, they bring in crews that are outside of the county, outside of the region, to be honest with you, sometimes outside of the country, to build these things. Crews made up mainly of illegal immigrants, 1 or 2 Americans, but 15 illegal immigrants. Indeed, raising taxes on the citizenry, particularly during an economic recession or depression, is complete folly. Cutting, gutting, and raising taxes in such situations have been historically proven to slow economic recovery even more and in many cases prevent it altogether. Revenue always comes up short in the next fiscal year. Yet while the Tax Commission is bringing its suggestions to the people of the county, it is also true that most people in Marion have no idea that there is any discussion over a new tax. This is partly because of apathy, but also because officials in Marion County routinely do everything in their power to keep discussions and decisions secret. Indeed, one rarely hears of any public comment meetings until the local paper mentions the outcome of the forums long after they have taken place. Now, this is not just for the COG situation. The Council of Governments, by the way, is represented by the acronym COG, Council of Governments. Don't get it confused with continuity of government. But in this context, it will represent the councils of governments. And it's not just the COG issues or the Agenda 21 issues that the County Council or the Tax Commission or anyone in government, local government in Marion County tries to keep secret, by the way. This is virtually every decision they make is made in secret for the same reasons. Apathy and just intentional secrecy. Even when the meetings occur, however, the hall is usually peppered, never even close to full, with select individuals who conveniently agree with the tax increase. Criticism of the tax is virtually unheard of among those who are proposing or promoting it. This might have something to do with the fact that the local paper, the Marion Star and Mullins Enterprise, refuses to publish any dissenting views that may challenge the power structure of the county, particularly those involved in pushing the new tax. In this regard, I know whereof I speak, after having my own article, which met all the guidelines set forth by the paper, ignored. Yeah, and that's not the first time that that's happened either. I've also had other short articles ignored by the paper. Now, to their credit, years ago they did publish an article I did against the Patriot Act, but in terms of more local issues, the paper has been more hesitant and outright refused to publish my articles criticizing the local corruption, which is rampant. It's very Freemasonic around this area. You can read my personal blog for the article and a brief account of censorship being exercised by the local media by clicking the hyperlink above. Yeah, in this article I have a link to the article I sent to the local paper. In fact, if you search this, it's entitled Marion County Attempts to Raise Taxes in the Midst of Depression, just to see what I had to say at the time when I thought it was a local issue. Nevertheless, for my own part, I largely dismiss this new tax attempt as just one more run-of-the-mill local corruption and greed, but nothing more. Indeed, that was my opinion until I happened into a discussion with an activist based out of another county in South Carolina who told me that his county was also fighting a penny sales tax increase. This particularly perked my attention because, in terms of the globalist agenda, when one witnesses the same developments taking shape in seemingly unrelated areas at the same time, one is generally witnessing a much wider agenda expressing itself disguised as an independent decision. This is exactly what I found to be the case in regards to the penny sales tax. For instance, in addition to Marion and Kershaw counties, the penny sales tax referendum has been introduced in Horry, York, Charleston, Sumter, Richland, Dorchester, Greenwood, Aiken, Chester, Florence, and Georgetown counties as well. The tax passed via voter referendum in most of these counties with virtually no opposition coming from any political leader and very little real opposition coming from the citizenry. Certainly, there was virtually no coordinated political action against the tax increase. Now keep this in mind. I'll go through how this works shortly, the process of how it goes to the voter referendum. But people are significantly propagandized in the lead up to the so-called referendum when it comes out. Of course, some counties like Horry, which has never seen a tax it didn't like, passed the referendum easier than others. Richland County put up much more of a fight than most other South Carolina penny sales tax targets. With this in mind, it is important to ask, where is the center of the penny sales tax? So finally, we return to the initial subject. Apparently, the impetus of the penny sales tax that is being stealthily introduced in counties all across South Carolina has its origins in the South Carolina Council of Governments, a statewide body of unelected members holding unelected and unaccountable positions which essentially act as the conduit of agenda between the federal, hence international, level of bureaucrats and those of the local level. Never think that corruption is worse in higher levels of government than it is at lower levels. As above, so below. They have given you their system. See, decisions aren't always made in county councils, by the way. They're also made in lodges of Freemasonry and in the bars after the public meetings are over, among other places. The Council of Governments, while international in scope, exists at the national, state, and local levels. With the exception of some county-wide and statewide councils of governments, aka COGs, the COGs are divided up by region, not by traditional borders. This is the case at both the national and state levels. As mentioned above regarding the county-wide and statewide COGs, some COGs are formed at the county level specifically. This means that a county-wide COG would be made up of individuals, elected officials, businessmen, community leaders, appointees, and other more questionable members from each city, town, community, village, or neighborhood in the county. One can take a look at the Mendocino County, Texas COG, known as the Mendocino Council of Governments, to see an example of the county-wide COG. It appears that county-wide COGs exist in counties of specific interest to the globalist decision-makers, while most other COGs are region-based. All the COGs in South Carolina are region-based. Virtually every state in the country, however, has a statewide COG. The statewide COG is the main board of oversight of the statewide regional COGs. Thus, underneath the South Carolina COG, there are 10 state-based regions. These regions are not defined by traditional county borders as much as they are defined by, as their name suggests, regional interest. For instance, the South Carolina COG contains the South Carolina Appalachian COG, the Upper Savannah COG, the Catawba Regional COG, Central Midlands Regional COG, Lower Savannah COG, Santee Lynch's COG, PD Regional COG, that's me, Berkeley Charleston Dorchester COG, Low Country COG, and Waccamaw Regional COG. The statewide regional COGs answer to the state COG, in this case the South Carolina COG, as a directing board and oversight committee. Now, I just read that from the article, and it might be a little difficult to grasp. Maybe not. I don't know, but I'll go over it again. You have, for instance, in the state of South Carolina, you have around 10 councils of governments. They're not separated as county borders. They're separated based on regions. Again, for instance, we can take mine, the PD Regional COG. This would encompass several counties, Marion County, Dillon County, Horry County, and Marlborough County. And there actually might be a few more. It'll encompass the cities, the towns, the incorporated communities, the unincorporated communities, and the county governments, all in this one regional COG. Now, they are subservient to the South Carolina State COG. This is the state board. This is the board of directors for the 10 regional COGs of South Carolina, or the 10 or whatever. I can't give you the exact number at this point. Yeah, I think there's 10. I just tried to count them. So, the state COG oversees the state regional COGs, but it goes higher. And back to the article. However, the state COGs are themselves subordinate to a regional COG that is established at the national level. The official name for this organization is the Council of State Governments. Nevertheless, it is only a COG at the next highest level. The CSG, the Council of State Governments, is itself broken up into regions, not bound by state or even national borders. The national level Council of State Governments, the CSG COG, is divided up into 5 regions or spheres of operation that bear an alarming similarity to the 10 FEMA regions established in recent years, which is headed by a Council of Governors, put into place by Executive Order 13528 in January 2010 as required by the Fiscal Year 2008 National Defense Authorization Act. The 5 CSG regions are Washington, D.C., Eastern Regional, Midwest, Southern Legislative, and West. Like the statewide regional COGs, the nationwide regional COGs are subordinated to the National Board of the CSG. Now, I have links to this in this article. You can go to the article, you can click on all of these things, and it'll take you right to the websites. These things have websites. Your regional COG at the national level, at the state level, at the local regional level, all have websites. You can go look this up yourself. It's not that hard to find. Now, again, I mentioned the statewide regional COGs are subservient to the statewide COG. The statewide COGs have a seat at the CSG, the Council of State Governments. But the Council of State Governments is actually broken up, as I just mentioned, into 5 different regions. And if you look on the map at the regions for the CSG, and you look on the map that's been so famous recently of the FEMA regions, the 10 FEMA regions, you can see an alarming similarity. It looks as if they just combined some of the FEMA regions and made them Council of State Government regions. Back to the article. Thus, it is a very tangled web that has been woven for one who wishes to discover the origin of a small county's penny sales tax initiative. I did not expect this when I started. However, what seems to be the average citizen to be merely another exercise in local governmental stupidity, incompetence, or corruption actually has its roots in a much more sinister agenda, namely the implementation of UN-based planning such as Agenda 21. I assume that most of the listeners know what Agenda 21 is. If you don't, you should go look it up. Agenda 21 is essentially removing all humans from the land. It's removing all property rights, destroying all property rights, and putting that in the hands of government, i.e. Private banks, private corporations, which are the government, which make up the government, which work hand in hand with the government. Removing humans from so-called wilderness areas, wilderness preserves, moving humans into cities, high-density cities, human habitat areas, what they'll call them, and to stack them and pack them housing units. Cities should be built up, not out. That's a direct quote. You can go check these out. There's a great site, Democrats Against UN Agenda 21. Also, Cassandra Anderson of MorphCity.com. If you check Rosa Corey and Cassandra Anderson's work there at Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com and MorphCity.com, you'll find out a lot of information regarding the Agenda 21 program. So back to the article again. Yet, although even at the regional COG level, initiatives like the penny sales tax introduced in Marion County and counties all across the country are largely hidden from the eyes of the public, when one understands the intricacies and technicalities involved in the interaction between the COGs and local governments, the implementation of the agenda tends to become much clearer. The way it works is that a centralized plan works its way from the nationwide Council of State Governments Board and Council of State Governments regional COGs down to the statewide COG boards, and from there down to the statewide regional COGs. The statewide regional COGs, such as the South Carolina regional COGs mentioned above, the PD COG, Santee Lynch's COG, and so forth, are then responsible for implementing the centralized Agenda 21 related plan at the local level via county councils, city councils, town village administration boards, and community organizations and governing structures. Again, the plan originates from the CSG, which is at the nationwide level. It goes down to the national regional COG, which then funnels it down to the state COG, which funnels it down to the statewide regional COG, and there you get the presentation at the county tax commission, at the county council, at the city council, and you get various politicians, administrators, community organizations, businessmen, various people in the area agitating for this plan, whatever it may be, whatever form it may take. In this sense, the county councils and other local governments act mainly as passive receivers and yes-men to the wishes of the COG. Although the stated mission of the COG is merely to provide an infrastructure for local governments to coordinate with one another for the purposes of developing mutually beneficial projects and addressing concerns that may reach across borders at the request of local governments, the fact is that the COG currently acts as directing board to the councils, not as an advisory body which serves the local governments. And that's true because when the COGs were first created, back in the 1960s, the late 1960s, it was under the guise of working as an assistant body, because if cities or counties were building a road, for instance, or working on some type of water project or some kind of economic improvement project, then the COG was supposed to function, or allegedly supposed to function, as a go-between. It would go between the two counties and iron these problems out and get everything on track. That's not what the COG does. It's never been what the COG has done, from what I can tell. It's act as a director more than an assistant. Certainly not just as an advisor. But while this may be the case, the evidence proving that the COGs are funneling top-down decisions to local governments is not in any way openly stated on COG websites and official forums, at least those that this writer is aware of. Yeah, I couldn't find any. However, when one examines the policy direction taken by the individual COG, one can easily see the same agenda taking form in each one. Likewise, the implementation of the directives issued by the COG, while taking a slightly different form in each county, is largely the same as well. Again, as I said earlier, you see the same agenda taking place all across the state. Take, for instance, the penny sales tax, which has either been accepted or is currently being pushed all across the state of South Carolina. Keep in mind the penny sales tax, whether it has already been passed or whether it is being proposed, has been presented under the guise of several different justifications: education, infrastructure, maintenance, recreation, highways, transportation, water and sewage, and developmental planning have all been used to justify raising the county sales tax by 1 cent. In Marion County, the main focus is repairs to recreational facilities, library and rural fire department expansions, and the construction of a new wellness center. Other counties have used the same argument in their attempt to raise the tax, as well as variations on the concepts mentioned above. Nevertheless, the playbook is always the same. Exactly. See, what happens is they come to you, and first, generally it's the recreation argument that they use, because that is the weakest argument. And they present this to you, and if you approve it, then that's great. Then they move on to the next sinister plan. If they don't approve it, if the county residents don't approve the sales tax increase, then they move on. They say they drop the recreational facility issue, and then they say we have to raise the penny sales tax for infrastructure. Okay, and that's a strong argument. But if it passes, great. They move on to the next thing. If it doesn't pass, then they move on. They say education, because they can pull at the heartstrings and say that if you don't want to raise the penny sales tax, then you don't care about the children. Education seems to be the most successful argument to raise the penny sales tax. Of course, just like the Lisbon Treaty in Ireland, it's repeated. If you reject it the first time, they come back a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time, and it wears you down. It wears the citizenry down. It wears the activists down. It wears the voters down, and eventually they get their way. So quickly, I'll go back to the article. We'll talk about the playbook that they use. First, after the directives from the top filter down to the statewide regional COG, the idea is circulated amongst the COG board, because many of the members of the regional COG are also individuals holding elected government positions, political appointees, active businessmen, and otherwise influential people within their local area. The idea for raising a tax, creating a new road, etc., is easily suggested to city or county council, tax commission, or other relevant agencies and individuals. In the case of a person who is already an elected public servant, the concept can be directly floated to the council or commission of which he is a part. Yeah, so what happens is because of the individuals who are members of the COGs are usually important people within the community, they're elected officials, important businessmen, just well-known rich people, then they're either able to pass it along to their buddies who also hold political positions, positions of power, and get this through the county or city councils, or they can do it themselves if they serve in that position. Once the idea is floated to the city or county councils, the tax commission, or the agency who will allegedly be the recipient of the future funds, discussion immediately begins between government representatives. Yet, although in any given county there will be a sizable portion of the population that will oppose the tax increase, like me, the discussion does not generally revolve around whether or not the tax should be raised, but upon how the money should be distributed. This has been the case everywhere in South Carolina that I've looked. The discussion, it's a foregone conclusion. How do we spend the money, not whether we should raise the tax. Thus, as I mentioned earlier, the meetings and forums that deal with the topic at issue are usually reported in the local papers only after they have taken place, while those individuals who may be more inclined to support such a project are conveniently made aware of the location of the meetings ahead of time. As a result, the meetings tend to reflect overwhelming support for the program. The ignorance and apathy of the general public is also a major aid to those with an agenda, as it is in the case of most laws and policies foisted on the population. After the distribution of funds has been discussed among the individuals pushing for the increase, the tax raise is usually placed on the ballot as a referendum to the general public. Keep in mind, this only comes after months of propaganda by the local media and repetition of the inevitability of the tax increase. Thus, with low vote turnout, overwhelming apathy, and large-scale ignorance, the tax increase is very likely to pass. If it does, then that aspect of the COG mission is complete. However, if the tax increase does not pass the referendum, then the COG goes back to the drawing board and suggests a tax increase on the basis of yet another justification. As an example, if the tax increase for recreational improvements and library and fire department expansions does not pass, the next suggestion would be a penny sales tax increase for road repair and maintenance. If this justification does not work, the premise of education will be used. Much like the EU Lisbon Treaty was repeatedly presented to the people of Ireland until it was finally accepted, the penny sales tax will not go away. Neither will any of the other projects initiated by the COG. It will be repeatedly introduced until the reasoning of the COG plan clicks with the public or until opposition begins to lose steam. Either way, the COG will succeed in implementing its plans, themselves coming from much higher up via the councils and popular vote. Of course, it bears mentioning once again that the penny sales tax is only being used as an example here. COGs and their agencies within local governments often use the same mechanism for the redirecting of roads, zoning codes, planning and development, and many other decisions that one would, at first glance, believe were made by their elected officials. You have to pay very close attention to these zoning plans that the COGs come out with, by the way, because this is entirely Agenda 21. They are remapping your county, your city, your state to the Agenda 21 plan right in front of you, right under your nose. You don't recognize it because nobody comes out and says, hey, we're going to implement Agenda 21. We're going to create human habitat areas. That's not what they do. You don't even notice that it's happening. It's been taking place for 30, 40, 50 years. And you didn't know. I didn't know. It's going to get to the point where Agenda 21 is implemented before anyone realizes what Agenda 21 is. ICLEI is a part of that. We'll talk about that maybe in a future broadcast. But ultimately, local communities are being transformed in front of the people that live in them, yet completely outside of their conscious knowledge. Indeed, the noticeable changes that do occur appear to have been made by the people themselves via their elected representatives, pathetic excuses for public servants as they may be. And they are in Marion County. However, this is by no means the end of the story regarding the COG and the agenda they are part of. In future articles, I will describe how the COG itself operates, the history of the COG, and its relationship to various international programs like Agenda 21. I'm going to have more articles coming out about the COG. We'll talk about another one in a future broadcast about the connections between ICLEI. I'll go into it in more detail. I talked about that briefly in the last broadcast. But again, I want to stress that if anybody has made it through this broadcast this far and still wonders what I've been ranting about and reading about for the last 45 minutes and how that's relevant to them, go to Google. And if you live in California, Google the California Council of Governments. If you live in Idaho, Google Idaho Council of Governments and see what's going on in your state. You might be shocked to realize that these things do in fact exist. Start going over the website. Start taking a look at the plans that the Council of Government has concocted and presented to the cities and counties in your area. And take a look at the plans. Take a look at the maps. Then go look at Agenda 21 and see if you see any similarities. Again, I'm going to try and do another broadcast very soon about the councils of governments, and that will be all for tonight. This is Brandon Turbeville, and again, if you want to follow my work, I write for Activist Post. Just follow activistpost.com. It's a great website to be at in any event. So, until next time, this is Brandon Turbeville signing off.